Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist as well as a psychological astrologer. And I'm delighted to introduce my guest today, Matthew McKay. Hello, Matthew.
I am glad to be with you.
I love the title of your book, Love in the Time of Impermanence. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What did you mean by that?
Well, in a way, impermanence is the basic foundational experience we all have. It's like everything is constantly changing. If you live in the material world, forms continually change. They break down, they reform, things die. The elements of those that once made up one form make up something else. And so impermanence is our lot. This is what we face. It's a Buddhist concept, but it's really not a very sophisticated idea. It's that when you look around, everything is changing. You know, rivers dry up, mountains erode, shorelines change. And in our short lifetimes, that some of the things we count on most stop existing. So we are surrounded by that, and they are particularly, the idea of impermanence is particularly important and crucial in terms of our relationships, because they too, at least on this material level, are impermanent.
And they are, and they're the thing that makes it feel most important is the fact of our mortality. So it's how do we deal with that? And what I love about your book is that is at the heart of it is this: how do we deal with mortality? So tell us about your journey towards this idea of love withstanding impermanence.
Well, I'm glad to do that. It starts for me 14 years ago when my son died. And I think I faced what anyone faces who loses someone you love deeply, is that question, does that soul still exist? And are they okay? You know, where are they and how are they? And those questions were just completely compelling to me. I just started on a journey to try to find Jordan. And that journey included lots of things, you know, visiting mediums and using hypnosis, by the way, past life and life between life regressions, which I bet you're familiar with, and trying to seek him in that way. Something called induced after-death communication, which Alan Botkin discovered or fell into using EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And actually doing that with Botkin, I actually had the experience of hearing Jordan, hearing his voice outside of my head, literally hearing his voice as if he was sitting in the room. And he was saying the things that I needed to hear, that he was fine, he loved me, he was with us, he was in a good place. And so I had all of that experience that it was very reassuring on some level. But for me, I still needed to have a conversation with him, and everything was very one-sided. You know, whether it was with mediums or with induced after-death communication, it was all very one-sided. So the late Ralph Metzner, who a psychologist who was kind of a specialist in after-death studies and after-death communication, taught me how to channel. And when I learned how to channel, it just opened the world of being able to have a communication with him anytime I wanted. And so I discovered in my connection to Jordan that the love between us still existed, that he still exists, that love is eternal, that our souls are eternal. And so that the only thing we can actually count on in some way in this world of impermanence is that love can continue and that our consciousness can continue. and that's this one kind of shining light in the face of all the change that we endure, and we're here actually to learn from.
I love that you found this. It's such a beautiful thing, and working with clients who have an understanding of an afterlife and the fact that the connection is not broken it's much easier to help them to deal with grief than my clients who have no concept or belief in something after. And the healing process is much slower for them, the process of acceptance. And so I'm always working with them to encourage them to not lose the connection within the framework of their belief system. So within that framework, just being able to still hold on to pictures or objects that are important, etc., just so that it almost feels as though they need that permission to do that, because there's so much in our culture about moving on. Mm-hmm. And you, as a psychologist, I'm sure, are very aware of this. And it's such a valuable thing. So it's wonderful to hear your personal story, and thank you for sharing that with us in your book and obviously here.
I appreciate what you're saying about your work with your clients, because it very much fits with my experience working with grieving and bereaved people. If they don't have a sense that anything exists outside of this life, the loss is profound. It's that relationship for them feels gone and irretrievable. And on the other hand, for people who do have a sense that a soul continues and that our consciousness is eternal, and that the relationship can continue, oftentimes the grief process at that point begins to shift. So you're saying, and I try to teach channeling and usually succeed with everybody who's struggling with grief. And once they start having communication with their loved one, and they experience firsthand that soul is still with them, still watching over them, still concerned for them, still loving them, and that relationship is active and alive, even though that person is physically gone from the planet, that's just a really profound shift.
Indeed. Now, something that I think is really important is that you talk about what love is. So you start describing what love is in the book. And one of the means by which you do that is you talk about what it isn't as well. Yeah. And I think the issue of disconnection and abandonment is, you're absolutely right, is at the core, I think, of feelings of not being loved and the trauma of loss as well. So when you have this belief that when someone dies, they are gone, then you completely have lost that connection. It's cut off. So it deepens that sense of pain. But it would be good at this point, I guess, to ask you to talk about what you feel love is.
Yeah, I do want to just respond to what you're just saying. I think that it's really important to know what the opposite of love is. It's not hate. The opposite of love is just what you said. It's abandonment. It's casting people out. It's tribalism. Saying, okay, you're good and you're a human being if you're in our tribe, and you're nothing, and we can dehumanize you if you're not in our tribe. And that whole good bad idea. There's bad people that don't deserve care, and we cast them out, and there's good people we hold on to. And that whole idea of good and bad, and evaluating people, and ultimately dehumanizing them, is really is the opposite of love. And there's a lot of things also that love isn't. It's not a transient pleasure. It's not sexual pleasure, for example. It's not an emotion. Emotions come and go. Even in the most loving relationship, I mean, how much of the time are you actively emotionally feeling love for that person? Probably a very small amount of the time, and yet we continue to love them. So how does that happen if the emotion just comes and goes? Love is not needs and desires. It's just like, I need this person. Well, or I desire them, their presence, or they're sexually attracted to me, whatever that is. That's not love. That's a need, and that's a desire, but it isn't love. So I guess I'm wanting to, dependence again is not love. So I just wanted to kind of mention that some of the things that we often conflate with love and believe are part of love are really not part of love at all. And so what I'm suggesting is that what love is a very active process. It's not a state, it's not an emotion, it's not a belief, but it's an active process. And the process involves several things, four key things. One is caring, really caring about what you love, caring about its welfare, that person, or even that thing. We can love things, we can love places. It's caring about the welfare of the beloved. And so that's a piece of it. The second part of it is knowledge, actually seeing what you love. If you can't see this person or a thing you love, you can't recognize, you don't know it, you can't really love it. So love is integrally bound up with knowing and seeing and getting, and that's a very active process, and not just a passive process of just like, oh, I've been hanging out with this person for a while, so I kind of get them. No, it's a very active process of paying attention. And the third element is compassion, which is recognizing the damage and the pain that is experienced by things and conscious beings that we love. They are being hurt, and to have awareness of that and concern about that, and some sort of commitment to doing something about that. And compassion is, awareness of the pain of the other, but it's also some willingness to support or help. Those are, both pieces. And the last thing is intention. It's what activates those other three. It's caring with intention, meaning I actively engage in caring behavior. Knowing with intention, I actively seek to understand the beloved. I ask questions, I explore, I pay attention, I study on some level the beloved. And then the compassion is I'm actively compassionate. I actively respond to the pain and support the beloved in the face of pain. So so everything about love is action. It's doing, not just being. And so I just wanted to emphasize that.
Yes, and I recognize everything, countless times when people regress into their childhoods and they're talking about not feeling loved. And I say, okay, so what is it that's making you feel unloved? And it always amounts to not being heard and not being acknowledged, not being seen. And so what you then have very often is the parent's intention to love being lost in translation somewhere. either because they're very busy or because they're very concerned that they want the best for the child and the child's not fitting into the mold of what's best and they want to push the child in that direction. It could be any number of reasons. But the definition of love as you give it is the definition of love as I would see it, through the eyes of what's missing for so many of my clients when we're working together. And it is that feeling of alienation that comes from not being seen. Sometimes.
And parents will say, years later to a child who's complaining about their growing up period. Well, I mean, I had food on the table every night. I drove you to school. Sometimes I helped you with your homework. I was, when you were sick, I was trying to take care of you. I mean, what more do you want? And what you're saying is exactly right. What that child needed, certainly to be cared for, that's a big part of love. But what that child needed was to be seen and acknowledged and known and recognized. And also that compassion piece, that their pain be recognized, what the ways they suffer, the ways they hurt, that could be known and recognized. And when that's missing, it's hard to experience just that one component, care, as the full experience of love.
And that's it, isn't it? It's the fact that it's not the full experience. It's part of it. And I feel that very often it's the anxiety of the parents to get it right that sadly gets in the way. And so you have really good parents accidentally failing to make their child feel loved. And it's a tremendous tragedy. And of course, it then gets translated into intimate relationships too. That expectation that you're going to be this person for me because this is what I see in you. And then, oh, you're not who I thought you were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very, very painful. And that, again, you're alluding to something I think that's really important, that we get into relationships now in our adult life and we end up kind of projecting or making the other person up. We project what we want them to be. We see them through this lens of our own desire and needs, and oftentimes don't very accurately see who they really are and what they really feel and what hurts them and what they struggle with and what they fear. We kind of don't get that. And one of the things I've done over the years with my couples, because I do a lot of couples therapy, is I actually have them interview each other and learn about each other, and in an active way try to understand, who is this person I'm with? What do they fear? What do they need? What do they care about? What matters to them? What scares the heck out of them? What kinds of emotions are they feeling at given moments in time? And to learn in an active way who this other person is, rather than just projecting and making up a story about who they are.
It puts me in mind of a story that I once heard from a friend whose cat went missing. And, she put up posters all over the neighborhood, and it turned out that this cat had a whole life that she didn't know about. Because as people in the neighborhood discovered that the cat was missing, they all came out to look for him because they knew him. And he meant different things to different people. So in one household, he would visit and the little girls would put him in the pram and take him out on walks. Somebody else, knew that he liked certain treats at a certain time and he was always there. It seemed that everyone in the neighborhood had a relationship with this cat that she only discovered because he was missing and thankfully found, much to the joy of everyone who knew him, but only knew different aspects of him. And together somehow they put a picture of who this cat actually was. And I think we're like that. Unless we, as you say, actively engage with another person, to ask questions, to know them, then how well do we know them really? And that's one of those things. It makes me think about gifts too. You know, there are people who buy gifts which are what they would like somebody else to have. And then there are people who think, now what would they like to have? And it's not to say that one is necessarily better than the other, because sometimes what you want somebody to have is a very intimate and personal thing that you want to share. And that's good too. But then there's also the other approach, and maybe both would be useful to adopt at different times.
Yeah. So this experience of knowing people on a deeper level, just like that wonderful story about the cat, that we only know the cat in the little context of our interaction with the cat, but we don't really know that animal, because that animal has a personality and a whole life that involves other relationships and other people, and we really haven't learned anything about it. And it's a beautiful example of I think the work of love is the work of discovery in many cases, and it's a very active process. And I guess the other thing that I wanted to just briefly talk about is that, I think on some level we have a mission here when we come to this planet. It's a very difficult place. I mean, people who speak about reincarnation and so forth talk about this as being perhaps one of the most difficult planets to incarnate on. It's a very challenging place. It's a physical world in which there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of barriers to love here. And in spirit, there's no barriers to love. When it's natural. It's how we communicate. It's how we connect. But when we come here to learn how to love in the face of pain, how to love in the face of loss, how to love in the face of these obstacles that exist all around, inside of us and all around us. How does a parent love a child when the child needs their attention because it's had a bad day in school and the parent is exhausted, or the parent is sad, or the parent is scared about something? How do I push through those barriers, that pain, in order to love? How do I love my partner when I've just been hurt by my partner? But how can I hold on to love and act on love in the face of that hurt? So learning how to love in the face of pain is this enormously important and central task that we have. And so that's why love is active rather than passive. Rather than a state of existence, it's an active behavior, an active process. And if we're going to hold on to love in this life, in the face of all the pain, in the face of all the barriers, if we're going to try to hold on to love, we have to do it actively.
And that, it seems to me, is the process of practicing unconditional love. That's ultimately what we all crave. We crave to be forgiven when we fall. We crave to be accepted, irrespective of whether we fit into the mold or not. And I think, as you've just put it, in spirit, that's easy. And I think it's, for many reasons, but from my human on earth perspective, it seems to me that it's easy because the connection is obvious. It's there. It's the one. We are linked. And we come here and it feels as though that connection is severed. and we're back to that feeling of alienation and disconnection, and then needing to recover that and find connection again. So it's no wonder it's challenging.
It's very challenging, and we come here with amnesia. We don't remember that there's this other world of spirit, and we don't remember actually how we're connected to all of the spirits and loved ones that incarnate with us, or and have shared lives with us, and are perhaps in this life together with us. We forget all of that. We have no history. We come here forgetting everything we know, and forgetting that these relationships exist. And it's a real struggle, but there's a reason. I'm sure you're aware. I mean, there's a reason for that forgetfulness. And, you know, the Greeks talked about crossing the river Lethe, you know, the river of forgetfulness, to get here. And the reason for that is, if we were fully aware of where we come from, and that these relationships are eternal, and love on some level is eternal, if we were fully aware of that, we wouldn't learn the lessons embedded in this place of impermanence. We wouldn't take it seriously. We wouldn't take the losses seriously. We wouldn't take the struggle with pain. We wouldn't be facing that with some kind of determination and how do I get through this without. So if we were fully aware of our history and who we really are, the lessons in this planet would be lost.
There's a question that I want to put to you now, which is, does everyone have the capacity for love? Or is love something that is learned? So in your experience, people who, and there are sadly too many, who experience very little or no love as babies and children, are they able to learn love at some point, or to discover love? Or is it something that's innate, which fear can block?
That's a great question. Well, the first thing I would say is that we can learn to love better. There's lots of ways to learn how to care more effectively, see and know each other more effectively, have compassion more. So I guess I want to say that, you know, love can be and is learned, in the sense that we can become so much better at loving and caring for each other. I think there are people that are literally born without the capacity to love, and I think so. Some sociopaths really they lack the ability to empathize or have any compassion. They can't take the perspective of the other person. They can't see the experience of the other person, or really care about it very much. And I mean, it's sort of a profound sort of narcissism that actually blocks the ability to know and care for other people. So I think some people may be stuck in that way, and I'm not sure, you know, how possible it is to climb out of that. Most people have some capacity for love, even if they haven't experienced much love growing up. I've seen countless clients over the years. I've been a psychologist for 45 years. Seen countless clients who had almost no love growing up, but yet were able to bring love into their life, into their relationships, once they were freed of some sort of toxic world that they grew up in.
See, I would agree. And I came across a psychologist arguing the opposite of our perspective recently, and it made me think, where do I stand? And I wanted to know where you stood, but I'm very much where you are. And I'll tell you why. Ultimately, I believe that most of us are born with this innate capacity, and it is that animals also have it. So there's something in nature about that ability to do it. And it is not anthropomorphizing. There is countless evidence out there now, not least of which they produce the same oxytocin hormone, the love hormone that we produce, and they produce it when they're experiencing connection with us or when we're connecting with them. If you speak to my dog, his tail wags immediately with pleasure, and excitement, just because you are seeing him and talking to him. So there is definitely something there with animals. And so to me, that says that this is something in nature, and that most of us definitely would have that capacity. And why that's important is because it means that there's hope. There's hope for most of us, irrespective of what that background is and how damaging it's been. There's hope.
I really appreciate what you're saying. I think there is something innate in us. Sometimes it may get damaged in a way that makes it very hard to express, but for the most part, there's something innate in us that can recognize the experience of the other. I mean, I'm sure you've had this experience with your dog, that you're upset and something's off with you, and your dog recognizes it. Your dog picks that up. Your dog is concerned on some level about what's happened to you, and that innate ability to recognize each other, and also to recognize each other's pain when we're hurting, is profound. And I guess what I'm suggesting is that we can build on that. It's not just like, okay, well, I have this amount of love or this ability to love, and that's all I can do. That we can actually learn how to love more deeply, more effectively, and have a love even in this impermanent place that endures as long as our lives last. And then, of course, after we're gone, that love continues in the spirit world. So yes, I think there is something innate inside of us that allows us to have that kind of connection or empathy.
I like that you use the word effectively, because I think most of us have the intention to love the people we love. We love them, we want to love them. But where things go wrong is that sometimes, as I said, it gets lost in translation, that intention. And so the aim needs to be, as you put it, to love more effectively by practicing engagement, wanting to know.
Loving effectively, but for me, the key is loving effectively in the face of these barriers and pain that shows up with emotional pain or physical, whatever it is. It's being able to love in spite of those things, and that's the work, and that's where we get hung up a lot. Let's just talk about falling in love. We fall in love, and we have this deliverance. We do a lot of projecting and imagining who this person is, and have this wonderful time. In these initial stages of our experience, and but everything feels great, and there's this lovely limerence, and everything is, and at this, but the real test of love is, well, what happens when something changes and when something is hard? How do we continue to love when that person, for example, gets older and is perhaps less attractive to us on some sexual or physical level? How do we continue to love when they are in pain themselves and not able to give as much, or we can't depend on them for as much as we had in the past? How do we continue to love them when they're mad at us for something? All of these experiences show up in the course of a relationship, and it's how we navigate them intentionally, actively, that kind of decides whether our love is going to endure or not.
And I think that's bound up with the ability to forgive as well. How forgiving can we be when we're not getting what we want from the other person? That's a challenge in and of itself, but that's also a component of love, the ability to forgive, because without it, there is no unconditional love, the thing for which we crave. channeling. I love that you teach people how to connect with their loved ones after they've passed from the physical world. Tell us about that.
Well, if you want, I can tell you how to channel, and you may already know how to do that, but your audience may be interested, and I can do it pretty quickly, actually. Anybody can channel. I have no special powers. I want to be clear about this. I'm not clairaudient. I don't have, I can't read the future. I have, these are not things that I'm capable of. But I can channel, and almost everyone can channel. And so basically, if you have a loved one you want to connect to on the other side, I would suggest that you get an object that that loved one gave you, or is something that they once owned. Something, a physical object that connects you to a loved one. That's here we live on a physical plane, so physical things are very important. And so having that object of connection is kind of useful from a channeling perspective. So have that object there with you. Have something that can help you with eye fixation. Just maybe a candle flame. I use a candle flame because it seems to hold my attention. Although I also have a view from my window that I use to create that kind of eye fixation. I'm just looking out at one thing. But candles work really well. Have something to write with. Ideally, a nice notebook, something that you would like to keep, because I think it helps to keep records of your conversations with the loved one. I go back and look at my conversations with Jordan a lot because I forget things, and sometimes I go back to read something that's exactly right, and I think I've been guided back to read it and remember it. So have something that you can hold on to write down your questions for your loved one and the answers that show up. So you got eye fixation, you have this object that connects you, and you have something to write with. It's helpful if you channel in a place where you feel very safe, comfortable. I use a desk that my parents gave me when I was a kid, so I mean, it's like it connects me to loved ones who are on the other side. Now, the actual process of getting into a receptive state, you can do it with hypnosis. I've taught people to use self-hypnosis to get into, to open the channel. Probably the easiest thing to use is basic Vipassana meditation, just a focusing meditation on the breath. So I use that myself, although I'm a hypnotist and I can do hypnosis, but I just use the Vipassana meditation because it sort of relaxes me. So I'm focusing on my breath, and I'm just counting each out breath while I'm trying to keep my eyes focused. And then when a thought shows up, let go of the thought and get back to the breath. So counting each out breath. So I'll count to 10. Usually I'll start again and do another 10. Sometimes I'll do another 10 in order to get the channel really open. Okay, so we're getting the channel open. And now Ralph Messner taught me to visualize an orb just above your head, maybe 6 inches above your head. It's the color of the sun. And just visualize that as you're winding down your meditation, and then visualize it elongating and connecting from the top of your head all the way to the loved one who's in spirit, and that is the channel. And as you feel that channel open, as you visualize it opening, and you're reaching the end of your meditation, you're now in a receptive state. Now, truthfully, when you think of your loved one, you're actually opening the channel. You may not know it, but literally when you think about your loved one, the channel starts to open, and you could, if you wanted to, begin to say things and listen. But going through this ritual really helps get the channel open in a way that you're aware of and that you can use and your loved one can use. All right, so now the channel is open. And I think it really helps to write your questions down. So write down start the conversation by writing the question down. I mean, it could be something simple like, how are you? Um, but it may be, there may be all kinds of questions you have for your loved ones, like, what should I do about blah, blah, blah? You know, and I get a lot of support and advice from Jordan, you know, and I'm, you know, and virtually anything that concerns me, I will be checking in with him and asking what he thinks. And he has a perspective because he has the knowledge of hundreds of lifetimes that we've shared, and his own, and you know, vast, you know, experience from which he can draw great wisdom. So, and of course, he has a knowledge of the afterlife that I have forgotten coming here. So, our loved ones often have a lot of wisdom to help us, and they can also call on guides to come in and provide additional support and guidance for us. So start the conversation with a question, and of course you can, like any conversation, you can go all kinds of places from there. Now, once you've written the question down, and actually the writing of the question is a form of meditation. You're watching the words take shape on the page. It's also a form of self-hypnosis. We enter into a trance state as we're watching a sequence of events, and in this case, the writing of the words. Now that is waiting, and I encourage people, the first word that shows up in your mind, write that down. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about what it is or does it make any sense. Usually a word or a couple of words will show up. Just write them down, and don't evaluate it. It's like, where did that come from? I don't know what that is. Just write them down, and trust that something will come out of it. And then you write the words down, and then just wait for the rest of the sentence. And after a while, the sentence will finish itself in some way. Now wait for the next word or two or three, or sometimes it comes in a very hesitant way. And eventually a sentence will get finished, and doubt will be there. You'll be saying to yourself, you know, I wonder if I'm making this up, and that's natural, and doubt is an integral part of channeling. But on the other hand, if you start looking at these sentences after a while, there's some profound knowledge often that is there, knowledge that you don't have, but that's coming from some other source. And just trust that if you do it for a while, it gets a little easier. And channeling comes in different forms. And sometimes it comes in just these little pearls, these few words. Sometimes it comes as what I call a download, where you just have all this knowledge, but you don't even have words yet. You have to find the words for all of the downloaded knowledge that shows up. And sometimes it comes like, you know, rapid fire. You know, it's coming faster than you can write it almost. But so all three of these can be ways that channeled knowledge shows up. It can be these little brief pearls, and the rapid fire, and the download. And however it shows up, it doesn't matter. Your job is just to write down whatever you can get. And when there's a little silence at the end, write your next question. And see if you can put judgment aside. Yeah, doubts will be there, but see if you can put judgment aside. Well, is that really my voice? Is that just my mind, or am I really hearing anything? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's coming from outside of me, so maybe it's just I'm making fine. You're going to have those doubts, but see if you can put judgment aside, like, this is baloney, or this makes no sense, or what am I doing? You know, just put that aside and do the process. And if you do it for a few sessions, you'll start getting really powerful rewards, because the answers you get will do two things. One, they'll tell you things, important things that you don't know. And number two, you'll feel more and more connected to your beloved. So those are beautiful outcomes from doing the work.
And you will also find synchronicity that crop up, that confirm that actually this is real. It's not your imagination. So the more you do it, and the more you get into the flow of things, the more you start seeing things backing up what you're getting as well, which is always a bonus, I think. But it's a lovely way to remind everyone that love is actually permanent. And it's an energy that even physical death cannot destroy. And so I thank you, Matthew, for your time talking to us today.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you so much for the invitation, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.
The book that we are discussing is called Love in the Time of Impermanence, and the link to that will be in the description box to this interview. And if people wanted to find out more about you, Matthew, how could they do that?
Well, there is seekingjordan.com is a website that that has a lot of Jordan's writings and a lot of channeled writings from him. So if someone wants to learn more about that, they certainly can. And there's some other books I've written, Luminous Landscape of the Afterlife, which is really about what we can expect after death and how to prepare for it. And Seeking Jordan, which is the story of finding Jordan and what he first began telling me.
Wonderful. Well, I think we must have you back to talk about your other books as well. And that would be a lovely thing to do.
Well, thank you, Anna. Much appreciated.
And thank you all for watching. Do remember that coming up in July, I have a workshop on creativity and a talk on creativity at the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary in Surrey. So if you are in Surrey, do come along and let's see what we can do to open up your creativity. I also want to mention that this is the anniversary, the year's anniversary of In the Light Growing Your Soul. And I'd like to thank you all for your support and my wonderful guests without whom this would not be possible. Next time, we're going to be looking at the power of ritual in healing. Until then, goodbye.